So, can everyone see the screen, by the way? Just, if you're blind, move to the front. Also, you'll see my shortcuts here, the keys I'm pressing, which is kind of going to take us straight away to the start, which will just be kind of going through UI and the shortcuts. And there's also language stuff. So, yeah, to start things off, you all have 3-button mice. Is anyone sitting at a computer with a mouse that has 3 buttons? That's kind of one of the important things with TouchDesigner. No. All good. Yeah. With TouchDesigner, 3-button mouse. Really, really handy. It's not vital. There's shortcuts you can get around the right click in the mouse, but like a 3-button mouse will help you a lot. So if you're doing any TouchDesigner work, get yourself one of those. So starting off at the very top here, we have 3 little buttons. Just as a little note for yourself, the wiki is a link that takes you to the TouchDesigner wiki. They like TouchDesigner. One of the reasons that people use it a lot, people love it, is because the community behind TouchDesigner, all the people who use it, contribute to the wiki and to the tutorials and to the forums really, really, really actively. So they are super, super helpful when you're stuck, when you're working on a project. Like, you know, I've met like a couple of people and they're just super, super nice people, and they all contribute to the wiki. And derivative, the company making TouchDesigner are very, very active on this. So if you click on this button, just as a little note for yourself, it opens your browser. My browser's broken right now, that's fantastic. But it takes you to the wiki where you can kind of see all, like, you know, you can kind of like look up operators, and it kind of gives you info on the whole thing. Forum, self-explanatory, it's the forum with the community where you can ask questions on anything, very helpful people. And tutorials here, which if it would open, that'd be fantastic. But if you open it, the tutorials, you will see that it takes you to a page where there's lots and lots of like beginner tutorials for people doing TouchDesigner. So if you want to start learning it, I would say click on that tutorials button. There's one called Introduction to TouchDesigner. It's like 3 hours long, but like the first hour will get you through everything we're covering here. And there's also a 100 series. It's just a question and like little kind of interactive things. So just a really, really handy resource there for learning TouchDesigner on your own. So, okay. So we're going to stay at the top here. If you look up here, you have this button. You have 4 or 5 buttons up here, and they're basically for the pane layout. And if you click on these, anyone uses Blender? Any Blender users? Yeah. Hello. Blender, you'll know this. You can split your workflow. You can split your window 10 fucking million times, like if you really need to. It gets a bit annoying sometimes, but just so you know, if you ever are in just one of these views, you can always get out of it by clicking the left one. So you're just back to one view, everything's bad. So, yeah, staying up here again. So we have this thing called the navigation bar, which is up here. So this is kind of like your folders architecture in Windows or Mac. So you have folders within folders within folders. In TouchDesigner, they're called components. It's much the same though. So if you ever basically you find yourself in this place, this is like limbo. It's like this weird place in your like network. It's basically as far out as you can go, and there's like kind of like nuts and bolts stuff here that you really just don't want to think about for quite some time. So if you ever like accidentally hit U or I, if you hit U too much, you'll end up here. All you need to go is in Project 1. Project 1 is just your initial normal file you'll be working with. So you're back in your network here. So U and I is the first shortcut. I goes into things, U goes out of things, or up and in. You think about it like that. Also, scrolling, little mouse wheel, you can scroll into anything, and if you scroll enough, you'll go into it. I know that the geo is the component, I can scroll into it and go into it. But then again, just press up and you're out of it. But yeah, the navigation bar kind of tells you where you are. So if you're ever really, really lost, you can kind of look up here and be like, Jesus, where am I right now? And click on Project 1 and you're kind of in the main network again. Cool, moving on. Yeah, basic shortcuts, shift left mouse button to select nodes. So hold shift, select them all so you can delete them. Control Z, Command Z for you, undo things, Command Shift Z to undo. Controls X, Control C, Control V is cut, copy, paste, works like any document really. And then right click on a node for options. Yes, so if you right click on a node, you get a lot of little options here. We're not really going to go through these right now. You have the basics down here. You have parameters, which you put up parameters in the second window. Here's one useful one I will go through though, which is if you use the middle mouse wheel click. Anyone on a magic mouse that's through right now? Sorry to leave it behind, but this is really important. You can also get it through info. But if you middle mouse wheel on any operator, you will get the specifications and the info on the current runtime of the operator. So any operator basically has all this info about what it's doing right now. You have the CPU cook time, how long it's taking the CPU to calculate the operation it's doing, the GPU cook time. If there's no GPU cook time written, you know it's not running on the GPU. And just some info about this kind of stuff. If you're not too comfortable with this right now, you don't need it. Most important stuff usually is size. You'll need to know the size quite often about tops anyway. But we'll go through tops in a bit, so don't worry too much right now. Am I going too fast? Is everyone still here? Yeah. I'm very fast? Oh, sorry. I seem to be a little slower. But yeah, I know I'm lost with these shortcuts. The shortcuts are all just written here. So, yes, the spacebar. Oh God, spacebar. So, we have a timeline in TouchDesigner, but TouchDesigner is a real-time graphics software, which basically, has anyone used Premiere here? Premiere or After Effects, which are basically like good stuff. Basically, they're fixed timelines editors. So you have a start of the video, as you scrub on, you will come later down the frames and you can go back and forward and you can basically freeze the time and just edit where you want to push stuff around. TouchDesigner isn't like that because it's a real-time graphics software. So everything happens at real time. So there's no such thing really as automation in it because you can't just go back in time. It's always in the present moment. So it's a little bit confusing that they do have a timeline at the bottom, and as you can see, it is always running. But look what happens when it gets to the end. Well, it just goes back to the start. So it really doesn't do much. You can reference it and use it, but it's kind of not rated it's not a good practice to do. The one thing you can do though with it is pause it. So if you hit space, it pauses the timeline. Now you can suddenly see all these things that have been moving around suddenly stop. And if I hit space again, it continues again. So what pausing does do is stops the process. It stops cooking everything, it stops rendering things, and it basically just freezes the frame that you're suddenly on. That can be handy if you're needing a second to I want to tweak something, but it can also trip you up because you can be tweaking something and it won't actually update until you hit the spacebar again. So you could be tweaking something in pause, and then you be like, why the hell is this not doing anything? What the fuck is going on? It's and then you unpause it, suddenly what happens? Yeah, really simple thing to trip yourself up on is the spacebar. Is there something else I want to say about that? It is handy. One handy thing with that spacebar, I do this sometimes. If you connect a node into, you're doing a feedback network and you connect a node back into itself and it completely jams your computer because it's just way too much to calculate. And you notice that, hit the spacebar once, it will just calculate that one frame. It might take 10 years, but it won't crash your program release. And if you haven't saved, that's a really important thing that you'll be like, oh, I need to save this. And then just hit the spacebar and just cross your fingers and it saves it. Yeah, that's pretty much the spacebar. The timeline, don't worry about it too much right now. So moving up to the top left, we're going to go back up here again. There's this thing called a palette, which is the thing on the left. Handy things here, wouldn't worry about it too much. Pauric, I think you might be using some of these later on?
We'll use one or two, yeah.
Yeah, so just if you accidentally hit this button, it basically disappears. I might actually, is it better like this, bigger space? I might just hide it for now, but just so with the notes, little button up there is the palette. Oh yes, the operator feature. Okay, so we're going to start looking at the operators. There is different operators types in TouchDesigner. There's tops, there's chops, there's subs, there's pops, dats, and mats. And then there's comps as well. We're going to talk about each one in depth later on because we're going to start into the building. There's going to be a lot of talking right now. I'm sorry, I know. a lot of talk from me as well. But most of these operators have this kind of window, which is pretty much similar. You always have a name. Every name has to be unique, and that's done by TouchDesigner itself. You can't name another movie file in one. If I just duplicate this, you'll see movie file in 2. And that is done specifically in TouchDesigner because of the referencing, which we will talk about later again, but everything needs to be unique. So everything has a name, that name is important. Then looking at the top left here, we have a viewer. If you click on the viewer, it toggles the actual output. It toggles the what would you call that? The heads-up display, basically what it's actually doing, and it toggles that on and off. So you might be like, okay, why do I care about that? But it is actually really important because, as we said, this is a real-time software. It has to calculate every frame in real time. That means, you can see up here, we have a frame rate, which I actually missed at the start. I should have talked about that. But does everyone know what frame rate is? Actually, just, yeah, everyone's comfortable with the terms. It's okay to know. So, okay, so frame rate, yeah.
Just no, sorry.
Sorry. So the frame rate is basically the frames put out to the screen in real time. So we perceive vision, continuous moving images, when several images that are consecutively played at a particular rate, then we will see it as a moving image. For film, that's like 24 frames. Anything under 24 frames per second, 24 slices in 1 second. Anything under that, it starts stuttering. But in real-time graphics, for like computer graphics, we usually always work with 60. It just makes everything smoother. You can go down to 30 if your computer's really dropping. I have done projects in 30 as well and just been like, fuck it, it is what it is. But 60 is kind of like your golden standard rule, 60 frames every second. So because this is real-time software, it needs to compute the next frame in the interval of what that frame rate is. I can't do the math right now. Scott, do you know what the difference is?
16
milliseconds.
16 milliseconds.
Thanks, Pauric. So the computers, the CPU and the GPU have 16 milliseconds to do all of the calculation from the starting generators, working through the nodes to your output to the screen, and it does it in 16 milliseconds. If it cannot do it in 16 milliseconds, say it takes 18, then your frame rate will drop because it has to do a little bit longer and then throw the frame out. Hope that's might be a good explanation, but that's as good as it gets for me. But basically, yeah, so this frame rate is really, really important. It's part of your biggest indicator of like, are you doing something wrong or is your computer not up for the task? Because you have to do everything in real time and you only have these intervals to do it, your frame rate can take a hit and you need to start thinking about, okay, how do I optimize this? What is the best way that I can keep working in real time? Because you're probably doing an installation where you might be taking a sensor and that sensor needs to move a circle around the screen. If that computer can't compute the circle moving, it will start stuttering or it'll just go like, duh, duh. You know, it can't render it. It needs to, like, it can't like go offline and render it, bring it back to you because it needs to happen in real time as the sensor is giving it its data. So there's optimizations we can do in TouchDesigner, and that's where good TouchDesigner people start coming in and like have all sorts of crazy tricks of how to optimize the computer to do the task. Really simple optimization trick is turning this thing off, and it's called sorry, I forgot it now. It's called the viewer. So TouchDesigner needs to compute this image for every frame, for every operator. So if you have a network of 1,000 tops all doing different things, and they're all connected together, it has to compute each one of those every frame and your last frame as well. It's a lot of work for it, and this is fully graphic. Like this, I don't think it's scaled down. So basically, once you start getting a bigger network and you know what all these are, it starts becoming very good to just toggling these off, and they'll have a little name to tell you what it is at least, but it saves you a lot of compute basically. And I can't show you that right now. I should have built a big patch where I turn them all on and off, but yeah, that's a really important thing, turning the viewers on and off to save yourself frames and save yourself cook time. I didn't really write that very well here, but if you want to like scribble that in. So yeah, moving down this thing, we have the bypass. So the bypass, if anyone does any DAWs, any music work with like plugins, VSTs, bypassing it basically stops the operation and takes its input and just passes on without touching it. So it just moves it on. That's very handy when you're kind of like doing something and you're like, oh, what happens if I take this out? See, you can kind of see here the little jelly beans, they're moving around. I bypass the displays, they stop moving, but the jelly beans are still there. Great. What happens if I bypass this? Well, if you bypass the input, which we'll come to, this movie file in is the holding the picture. If you bypass the generator or the source of the image, well, then you don't have an image anymore. So sometimes bypassing can screw you up. So you can't bypass anything to check it, but you know, it's handy. There's also this lock, which, to be honest, I don't use that much, but, oh yeah, also I don't use this clone again. Forget about it. Just I fucking don't know what that is. But yeah, this lock is pretty handy sometimes if you want to like make something that, or if you have something that you don't want to compute anymore. You just needed one frame from it. It's a video, it's a square moving around. You just needed one frame of it. You can lock it and that saves you some CPU as well. That's a good plan. Not that handy, but it's there for you. Anyway, moving on. So, yes, staying in this little window of these operators, we'll look down here now and see the viewer active button. So this is on all types of operators. So these are tops. You can click on the viewer active and you can scroll this thing around. Pretty much useless at this point for the tops. But this, that here, is a chop. You can see because it's green. If we click the viewer active here, oh yeah, it moves around as well because it's in time slice mode. So we'll come back to that later on. But if I just bring in another chop, because that's what I'm going to do right now. Where's it doing? Hello. So if I bring in a chop like this, and I turn the viewer active, then this little up arrow comes in, and I click and drag, and then I get this little sideways arrow. And that sideways arrow tells me I can reference, which basically just means you drag and you drop it on a parameter. We're going to cover this way more in depth later on. I just wanted you to have seen it right now. But this viewer active, if I try to do that without the viewer active, it doesn't work. It just does something else. So the viewer active for chops is for referencing. We'll talk about referencing later on in depth, as I said, because it's a big part of what we're going to do. But I just want you to know that this viewer active thing is important for that part. Every type of operator, though, has a different way of, a different command, I'm going to call it, for the viewer active. This geo is for rendering 3D geometry. We're going to cover this one in depth later on as well. But if you click the viewer active here, you can then manipulate the viewport on it. So it actually doesn't do anything here outside of it's just a little helpful thing to have a look at your geometry while it's being rendered. So that's that. And then moving over to the left, there's this display one under the tops. Tops are the blue ones. So when you click this blue button, bang, you get your output of laptop gets shown onto the background of your workspace. That's very handy for prototyping. This won't obviously put out your HDMI or anything like that, but while you're building your network, I usually do this to kind of keep it in the background so you can kind of just like have a look at what's going on. You can also do this with several of them. It gets a bit confusing after a while, but you know, you're your own guy. You can do better. I usually just kind of have the last one in my network. I usually just turn the viewer on, and then I can see what your last output is. Obviously, if you want to see this one, but you turn on this one, well, you're not going to see that output because you're further down the chain. You're down at the start of the chain. So, you know, make sure you're always doing it on the last one. Is everyone still with me? Yeah. Good stuff. Bottom right operators. Viewer active flag. Yeah, more on that below. This bit. Very great. Awesome stuff. Okay, so we're going to move on to the parameters. So every top chop operator has a parameters window. You can hide and unhide the parameters. You can hide and unhide the parameters window by pressing P. So that basically just like drops in this little dialog box on the right. I think you can also make it floating. Don't, I'll just say, but you can do it if you want to. But yeah, hides and unhides that. So the parameters window, Once you click on a top or on shop, it basically changes it to that operator you just clicked on. And you'll see here you have all the options that you can basically change for the operators. You also have these pages, I think they're called pages, which basically have more options. The commons page is common for each operator category. So all the tops will have the same commons page. See, it has a commons page there, has a commons page there, has it there, and it's always the same settings. For the other types of operators, the commons page is always the same as each other operator, if that makes any sense. So for chops, all the commons will be the same here. We'll talk a little bit about that in later on. But yeah, parameters, if you click on a parameter, like a slider like this, you can change it, up and down the slider. Just because the slider stops at 1 here doesn't mean that's the only range you can do. Any parameter can go into the minus, go to the plus. It doesn't mean it will do anything, but just because the slider stops at 1 does not mean the speed stops at 1. So keep that in mind. You can click here and just type in 2, and that will only work if that's a video. So let's have a look at that. If we click the plus here on the movie file in, we can drop in a video. So these are the videos that come with TouchDesigner. So I'm just going to drop this one in. That's pretty heavy, but let's just do this. So yeah, if I change the speed here, that's 1. 1 is always normal speed. I don't know if anyone knows that for other softwares. 0.5 is half speed, and 2 is double speed. But as you can see here, the slider's all the way at the top at 1, but I can type in whatever I want here. A kind of unique feature of TouchDesigner is the increment ladder. So if you click and hold on speed, you get this little thing, and you can like move up and down it. So this basically says by what increment do I want to increment this parameter. So I can go on 1, and then it'll be in integers, and I can go up, and I can go down, you go left or right. Or if you want to do a really fine adjustment, you can go 0, 0, 0, 1, and then you can do a really fine. It's just because TouchDesigner has such a broad range of needs. Like sometimes you need to increment it with 10s, sometimes the 1. So I think that was their kind of get around. It's honestly a bit finicky to learn, but you do kind of get used to it, and it is handy. But you can also just type in your value there, whatever does work for you. So, yeah. So the parameters, kind of need to talk about this part, which is what is a little bit maybe difficult to learn, but if anyone works in DAWs, digital audio workstations, they will know what automation is. If you work in After Effects, you will know what keyframes are. If you don't work in either, basically all parameters in TouchDesigner can be modulated. So they're not called automated because you can't automate something in a real-time software. You cannot just set keyframes because you can't scrub back and forth. You're always in the present frame, cooking it at that frame and moving on to the next. So you can modulate things. So we're going to talk about referencing later on, but just remember that all of these, if you drop down, you can basically modulate these by either typing a script in here, so that's a Python script, or dragging a reference to here. Basically, I can just do one really quickly by dropping in a LFO here. We'll be using the LFO a lot today, but this is what modulation basically looks like. It is the real-time use of a channel, which is pretty much the source of all your modulation in TouchDesigner. And these are basically cooking a singular number stream in real time, and you can send that number stream to any parameter. Even if it's a text parameter, you can send it because the background of TouchDesigner will compute that as a 0 or a 1 and will toggle the play on or off. So I can even just reference this to here, and it will basically just play, not play, because it basically just looks at the number and says, is it over 0, under 0? Again, we're going to talk about referencing more in depth because it is a really, really big part of TouchDesigner. It's pretty much your bread and butter. But again, part of the parameters is all of these parameters can be modulated. And think of modulation like automation. If you want to do something, if you want to do any sort of movement or getting something down, that's the way to do it. So I'm just going to delete that because that's going to get really annoying. Bam. Cool. So yeah, what time are we at? Oh my god. Time is flying. Dun, 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 dun. Yes. No, where's the good old jelly bean? Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, operators and their categories. Here's the big one. So, operators are everything in TouchDesigner is done with operators. And there's, as I kind of mentioned a little bit kind of throughout this, there's different operator families or categories. And they differentiate mainly in the biggest way by thinking of data in a different way. We're not going to try and get too far down that thought, but behind it all, it is just numbers. You're in a computer, so all of these things are just computing numbers. But each little operator category just uses those numbers in a different way. That becomes quite apparent later on when you're starting to use tops and to change tops and move it. Like you can see it down here. There's a noise, which is one channel of data, but then suddenly it goes into pixels and then it modulates pixels. So behind it all, it's all just numbers, and the way the different operators crunch those numbers, that's how they differentiate themselves. So not to get too far down that, but a little shortcut there. If you hit tab, you open the operators dialog window. Yeah, it's called dialog window. If you hit tab again, you flick around the operators. So these are all the different categories and operators you can use in TouchDesigner. We're kind of only going to cover tops, chops, sops, and mats, maybe some comps. But there's DATs. We're not going to talk about them. They're just a little bit more advanced and kind of hard to work with. And then there's a new operator type called pops, which is similar to sops. So that's also still an alpha. We're not really going to use it right now. But okay. Oh yeah, I kind of skipped over that part, didn't I? Well, never too late to talk about it. So TouchDesigner, as you might have noticed, and I've just kind of not said it, it's a node-based workflow. Basically, as you see, these operators are connected with these cables, and these cables pass the data from one operator to the next. So you always read your networks, which is just the name that we call the nodes, from left to right. So all your operators, if they take an input, will have their inputs on the left, like this, where you can connect the cable, and the outputs like this on the right. So that's what I mean, left to right, input to output. Yeah, that's pretty much that. The color of each of these inputs and outputs tells you what kind of an input it expects. So all this is color coded. So this is purple or blue actually. I said blue earlier. The purple ones are tops, so you can see that this one is gray, so it's not a top, but it expects a texture input, a top input, texture operator top. So that's how you know what it's looking for. You can also just hover over it, and it'll actually tell you input 0, top gain. So you know, okay, that needs to be a texture. Yeah, that's pretty much that. So if you double click or hit tab, you can pull up any of these, and these are the texture operators. So texture operators, again, for anyone who does 3D graphics, knows that texture is just a fancy way of saying image. That's literally it. Moving textures, still just an image. So think of texture operators for if you want to do anything with an image in TouchDesigner, that is the way to do it. Image means 2D. And to be quite specific, just to maybe make it a bit complicated, 2D images are really just matrices of numbers. And a matrix is literally just a grid. It's a grid of numbers. So that kind of then hints you at how TouchDesigner thinks about these things. We look at a grid of numbers as an image. The way we see the grid of numbers is colors on a screen, but this grid or this image has this grid size of 1280 by 720. That's what you call resolution. And all screens have a resolution. So you need to always know what resolution you're trying to put out to. Is it a 4K screen? I think that's like 3180 or whatever. Or we're limited to 1280 by 1280 here. But if you see size or resolution, just think of that little grid of numbers. And they're basically just pixels overlaid each other, like numbers overlaid each other to make color. So texture operators basically operate on those numbers in a grid format. The textures, the tops, they run on the GPU, which is what kind of makes them really, really powerful. And this is kind of one big reason why people have gravitated towards TouchDesigner, because it's really, really efficient. As we were saying earlier, you have 16 milliseconds between each little frame to compute the next frame. It needs to do that really fast, especially when you have lots of things going on, things being passed back and forward. So the GPU basically computes all of those little pieces in the grid in parallel. So that's how it does its job really, really quickly. And that's why it's recommended to have a GPU with TouchDesigner. Some of you might have noticed you tried to run TouchDesigner. Oh, suddenly it doesn't work so well. You're running it on the CPU. Your CPU has to do each one of those parts of the grid in serial. Does one, moves on to the next. The GPU does it all in one go. So that is why it's recommended to try and do as much as you can in textures, because then you're doing it on your GPU. It's kind of, again, one of those optimization things. So yeah, so anything we do in TouchDesigner with images, we do textures, and we do tops, sorry. And yeah, that's pretty much that. So yeah, I talked about the movie file in a little bit. So it's the way to bring in external images or videos that are pre-rendered from your computer into your network. Pretty self-explanatory, and it always takes the resolution of the image you've dragged in, or you can also change that here in the comments page. We'll talk about this a little bit in the end because it doesn't work here, but the comments page is where you change your resolution if you ever need to. We're just going to delete this though and drag in something fun. Movie file in, not that one. Video device in, yeah. Okay, so what happens now? So if you just want to find a video device in, you can hit tab and just type in video device, or you can find one that's just down there. So drag it in and connect it to the top one of the displays. And you're all going to get a big stare, you're all going to see yourself suddenly, but we have a funky House of Mirrors camera effect because of the modulation going on inside of this place. Yeah, so the video device in, the super handy one, basically takes in any video input signal connected to your computer. Your camera is your basic one. If you don't have a camera on your laptop, most laptops do, to be honest, at this point, and all the Macs do. So yeah, you can make a funky House of Mirrors effect. If you now go into the noise at the bottom here, you can change that effect. Extra wave, more harmonics, whoa. And you can kind of get whatever effect you want. Yeah, so to change the mirror effect, you go click on the noise, and then you get the parameters here. So you know you're on the noise when it's green up here and it says noise. That's how you know you're on a different job, and then you can change the parameters. I'm not going to explain the parameters because I couldn't even explain it to you if I tried. I just know that some of them are good and some of them are bad. But period is usually the main one. That's kind of the size of the noise. And you can kind of see the output of the noise in time. We'll talk about time slicing in a bit. But just think of this as time moving forward. And this section of time being used to move the width of the image. That's kind of what's happening here. We're going to change that in a bit, but don't worry about it too much. But yeah, you can move the period around, get real funky, and then the amplitude of noise is basically the size of the noise waves, peaks and troughs. So you can kind of just move them up and down, or make them bigger or smaller. Yeah, I'm gonna maybe not go so heavy on that. And maybe leave it there. So, what else could we throw here?
And then if instead of this, you can just do it transfer, or if you just drag that in. And then you can set.
Sorry, I'm kind of.
On this.
Okay, let's throw a threshold in.
Then you get the
If you open the top and type in threshold, or you look to the right there and you see threshold. Click on it, you drag it. I'm going to show you one more thing actually, which is really good to know. You can also right click at the end of any operator, like just there where the output is, right click on it and it'll bring up the exact same window. But this time if you drop in the threshold, you can see it's doing something else. It's actually dropping it in series. So it just makes life a little bit easier. That it's a little shorter rather than having to disconnect the nodes and reconnect them. You can also do the same thing by right-clicking on the cable and saying insert operator, and then you can just drop a new one in. Pretty much the same thing.
If you click add operator instead, does it just add it manually?
I think it adds one in parallel. I think. Sorry, I've actually never tested that one. Yeah, so it splits the stream, exactly. So if anyone's confused here, what's going on here? Well, we've taken the output of displays because again, everything is being computed in real time. It's just passed on. Here's my output, video device in takes my video device and passes it to displays. Displays takes it in, does its little operation, passes it on. But we can just say out of the displays, well, I don't know what I want to do. I want to do two things. I'm being a bit greedy here. So you can pass it to a threshold and pass it to a tile. And that's where you can start making more complicated things, where you can take one side of the input, do your magic over here, take the input, do a different kind of magic, and bring them together again. There is no bounds really with this. So I guess a good one to talk about here is how do we bring things together in images? Anyone? Anyone do Photoshop? Anyone know layers? How would you do it? Two images on top of each other. Yeah? But we need to do it in some way that you can see the other images. So a simple way would be opacity. You can just blend two images together with opacity. But a funner way to do it, because I hate opacity, is to composite things together. So comping, again, Photoshop people will just know this is blend modes. Two images over each other, you look up each of the pixel and you do a math operation to add or subtract or multiply the pixels, and basically you will get some sort of blending of the two. So if anyone's a bit lost, you take a display, you make a threshold, you click here, you add a tile, or you can add whatever you want to be honest, but I added a tile here. And then I dropped in a comp after the threshold by just clicking here, and then add a comp, and then I just plug both into the comp. So some operators can take two inputs because that is how they compute their operation. Composite will actually tell you, oh God, I hate when that happens. Disconnect. If you drop the comp in without giving it two inputs, it'll actually complain and it'll give you an error saying not enough source to specify, because composite needs two images, needs two layers to comp things together. If it has one layer, it's not able to do the operation. So let's go back to what I did there. Thank you. And yeah, so the composite basically, it's set to multiply, but you can flick through these and just see all the effects it gives you. It's basically just a math operation of the pixels that it takes in, and then it just passes them on. Some do something, some don't. I'm gonna stick on the black and white thing, why not? Okay. Is anyone lost? Is anyone? Yeah?
Which comp did you?
The color mode I use is called Dodge. Or do you mean which operator comp?
Which operator?
Yeah, it's called composite. So if you put up the top, go to the top window, make sure you're on this one. Make sure you're on this one, and then just type in composite. It's just down here on the left. Yeah. And as I said, if you right click at the end of the operator and drop it in at that, it'll actually drop it in the series after the operator you want. So, yeah, that's pretty much that. Yes.
Is there, for the operators, is there a shortcut to cycle through them? Can you
No.
No. Okay,
No.
so you've got us individually.
I don't think so. That would be really fantastic, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I don't think there is. Most people, as I've seen in tutorials, they're so quick, they type in tab and then they're already typing in the operator. You get very quick to know, like, there's a lot of operators here, but like, hand on my heart, I'm using most of these. Like, motion, yeah, it's for the loop. I don't have one. Connect, a lot of these are for like inputs from sensors. If you don't have the sensor, you'll probably never use it. And like some of these, like screen grab, I don't know when I ever use that. Open color IO, I have no idea what that is. So like, yes, there's a lot here, but you will only probably use about 30% of this, and that 30% you use every day, all the time. Like levels, or like, like difference, handy feedback, you will use that all the time. Level, as I said, that's for like colors and like changing the contrast and brightness, blurs. It's really one of those things where like you really only use the same ones, and by the time you got to the point of being like, oh, I want to drag that in, you already know what it is, you're just typing it in. So
Sorry, I wasn't clear. I meant the operation rather than the operators. So you see the dodge mode. Can you just can you go tap 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 tap?
good question. I don't think so.
No.
It would be handy if you could just scroll over, right?
Yeah.
But it's not letting me, so no. I think again, this is part of the parameters that's important. This can be modulated as well. So I can make an LFO and I can reference that, and I can change the blend mode up and down. So I feel like if they put too much UI into it, you wouldn't be able to do that, because again, behind the scenes, this is just a numbers table that scrolls up and down. So that would be my guess. But no, sorry, you can't do that. You have to click on it and pick one every time. And then if you release that. Okay, good job. Sorry, what's your name? Sheila. So yeah, Sheila just noticed there that you can click the plus and you can change this, the number, which is, as I say, the number in the table. And if you just drag this up and down, it actually does change.
Oh, great.
So
Thank you.
do you want to do a workshop back here? Next time, man. I'm up here for no reason outside of passing. Anyway, moving on. So, channel operators, chops. So we're going to come back to these. I think we talked about these a little bit at the start, but if texture operators think of everything as a grid, channels, just think of things in channels. They're the most basic type of operators we can do, really. And this noise is a channel operator, but it is very important to know that this noise right now is in time slice mode. This is a little bit of a weird concept. I don't think I've seen it in other programs, but it is quite important. So basically, you can have channel operators in two versions. There is the normal mode, which is just showing you the current number that it is at, and it just keeps on putting out each number consecutively, one after the other. And that present number is used to modulate. So it's one dimension basically, and it moves along, moves along, moves along. The time slice mode of an operator is all the numbers. So this is present moment, and this is the future, what is coming up. So it's basically like a long array of numbers that you can use if you need more than one number and you need a length of it. It's not that useful outside of how they use it here. So honestly, mostly if I use a noise, I will click on the noise, I'll drop it in, I'll go over to commons, and I'll turn on time slicing, which basically now mimics how this LFO works, and it just gives you one number, and it just gives you that one number in the present moment, and it doesn't give you the graph. Because that can really fuck you up. Sometimes you're trying to I just need a noise number, and you're just got this graph, and you're trying to move it around, and it's just not working. So honestly, the time slice mode thing, try to always work in this very simple mode. There is ways to convert back to time slice mode. I think it's the trail chop, but again, by the time you'll get to that, you'll be able to explain this better to me, because Yeah, so if you use the trail chop, now we're back in time slice mode. See, now we have this graph of numbers again, and we can basically use this string or array of numbers to do something with it. But as I said, I have not really had much use for it. Like, see the trail, now we're back in the trail. I guess really quickly, just to explain what's actually going on with this effect here. This effect uses the time slice mode, and I guess that's why they put it in the very initial init patch in TouchDesigner, because it is actually quite a big thing in TouchDesigner, that this array of numbers, starting at present, going into the future, is then converted into a 1 by 1280 pixel grid. Or 240, sorry. So it is a top, and it's basically looking at these numbers, saying, what's the current number here? Oh, it's 0. Okay, well then that means it's black. Let's move on to the next one. We're down here. Oh, it's even darker black. And now we're up here. Oh, it's white. So it's just converting those numbers, the channel numbers, from 0 to whatever, into pixel brightness. And pixel brightness is literally just a number from 0 to 255. This is what I mean. Everything is just data. It's just a way of thinking about it. So this grid from 1 pixel high to 240 pixels long can then be used in the displace job. And the displace top. The displace top, basically, all it does is displace the pixel from its initial place to the displaced place. And it needs a value to do that. So that's where this chop, the top, comes in and basically says, where do I push the pixel to? And the chop says, well, this is dark, so keep it low. This is bright, so push it up. So you can actually see that this movement here is actually the waves in the top up here. So that's all that's happening there. It becomes handy later on when you're kind of doing that pixel mapping for DMX, and you can do like really cool stuff with this chop the top thing. But in kind of basic stuff, I haven't used it so much. I just wanted to talk about the time slicing thing, because that's something that's definitely a kind of a weird thing to get your head around. And as I said, you don't need to get your head around right now. You just need to know how to turn it off, which is on the comments page, time slide it on, you're golden. But I will kind of put this just so we can have full effect for now. Okay, so yeah, as I said, chops, think of everything in singular channel, one dimension, time, or really just 1 pixel. And for any programmers, chops are variables. They have a name, channel 1, and they have a number. That's pretty much all they are. It's as basic as they get. So if you're a programmer and you're like, oh, I just need some variables, the most basic chop is a constant. This is your variable. Here's a channel, name of your variable, and this is a number tied to it. So channel 1 has the value of 0.54. If I click the little plus down here, I have another variable. So channels, so chop data streams can hold several channels, but they are unlinked. There's no relevance to them outside they're being passed down the same little wire here. So I'm just gonna add another one here that we're gonna use a lot, called math. So as you can see now, outside the constant, we have a channel 1 with a value of 0.54, and you can also see, the movement or the value on this little bar, which gets quite handy. You can kind of tell what it's at. So the bar also goes from 0 to 1. But I think if you go further, I don't know, I think it extended something. Yeah, extended, I think it goes from 0 to 10 then. Anyway, so channel 1 has a value of 2 now, and channel 2 has a value of 1. And then all that is being passed down 1 wire. So it's literally just being passed into the math. You can now operate on all of those numbers individually. No, sorry, you have to operate on these numbers together because they're all being passed down the same wire. So the math top is basically for that. So if you have several channels all in 1 wire, you can add them all together if you want to. Not so handy, but sometimes you, excuse me, you need to do an average. So you might combine all the channels, add them together, and multiply them by how many you have. You know how to do averaging. What is also handy, which is actually used quite a lot. So let's say you need to add something together, but you want to get the integer of the number. So I don't know, everyone did past maths here, floats, integers, everything is floating number. within TouchDesigner. That means it is a decimal number, but sometimes you just want an integer because you want to trigger a table, or as we saw the table from that you showed, you just need 0 to 10 in integer numbers. At that point, you just go down here, integer, floor. And now the output of each one, as you can see, is rounded either down or up or whichever way you want to do it. So what else do I want to show here? Yeah, the next page, turn the floor off. You can multiply each number, you can pre-add each numbers. So this can be handy for doing manual scaling. If you know what you want, you're like, oh, I just need everything to be half the size, multiply it by 0.5. I need everything to be twice as big, multiply it by 2. So MathTop is really handy for that. But probably the handiest part of all this is the range. So let's just delete that and bring in, oh, I actually have an LFO up here. Bring in an LFO. I have one up here. I'm just going to drag it down. It wasn't doing anything. So drag it in here, drag it into math, and slow this motherfucker down. What's going on? Yeah, okay. So LFOs, as you can see here, they're bipolar, so it passes through 0. It's just a fancy way of saying it goes up to 1 and down to -1. So down to -1 and back up to 1. So let's say you're like, okay, I actually need it to be half as big. Well, you just multiply it by 0.5. You can do the math and say, let's say you want it going from 0 to 1. You want it to be unipolar. Fancy way of just saying it goes from 0 to 1. I know it goes from -1 to 1 on its default, and I'm too lazy to do all the math in my head. I'll just go into the range, and it'll ask me from range, what's the bottom, what's the top, I know that, -1, and then to range, 0 to 1. And hey presto, it's now going from 0 to 1. Let's say I couldn't have minus numbers because the input sensor doesn't accept minus numbers. That is what the MathTop is really handy to do. It kind of takes the whole headache of having to do the math. All you need to know is, what's my input range? You can ballpark it as well. Fuck it, I do that, like, you know, ballpark the input range, and then you can kind of scale your numbers to however you need. So that's probably one of the biggest things the MathTop is really useful for. Anything else to be said about this? No, not really, to be honest. Sorry, we're still trying to get through the operators. Man, it's taking longer than I thought. Am I going too fast? No, I feel like I'm racing here. What's the time saying now?
It's good. We got 25 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Fair enough. No one's got any appointments to go to? Still all good? No one's called? Okay, great. So we're going to move on from channel operators to SOPs. So if texture operators do everything on a grid in 2D, and channel operators do everything one-dimensional, surface operators do everything in three-dimensional numbers. So everything we want to do in 3D has to be surface operators. So they all think about the numbers in 3 ways. In X, this is your X. It can also be called width, or across. Height, your Y, and then in TouchDesigner, your Z is your depth. Anyone who does 3D knows that every fucking 3D program thinks about X, Y, and Z in different ways. I'm sorry about that, it's not my fault. X, Y, Z, live with it. So, just gonna leave that down here. Whoa, let's not do that. But let's give ourselves a little bit of space here anyway. I don't want to see this anymore. So. Okay, so one little thing, just drop a null at the end of your texture operator chain. Whatever you've done there, you don't need to follow along with me, but just drop a null here. And we usually know every chain that we do. So if you do a chop chain and you've done your calculation, you're happy with your math, you drop a null at the end. It will become very, very clear to you why you do that, but just take my word for it. It's like a little checkpoint for you. Because if you want to reference from a math, and you reference from this point, and then you actually want to do something to that number later on, because you just didn't think about it, you need to re-reference your whole network. And that is a fucking pain, to be honest. So always null everything out. It's a little checkpoint along the way to say, hey, I think from this point, I'm going to use these values, or I'm going to use this image, so just drop a null. They really don't take any compute, so there's no downsides to them. You can drop as many as you want. Anyway, we know that our top chain here, our network, and we're going to move over to this geo. So the geo is a kind of a special little thing because it's actually a component, but it is part of the SOP, our 3D rendering network that we need. So I'm going to delete it for now because we're going to bring it back in a better way. There's a much nicer way to bring in the geo, but for now, just go into SOPs. And you can get there as well, again, by just clicking tab and flicking through these. And just drop in a box. Actually, no. Stick with the tutorial, Walter. Where's the torus? Yeah. We're gonna drop in a donut. Torus. Okay. So this is basically a 3D primitive shape. And if you make the viewer active on a SOP, it's not, you don't reference it like a chop or move the screen around. You just have this viewport and you can view your shape. It doesn't actually do anything outside of just helping you have a look at this. But here you can see your X plane, which is just all your values from X, from minus X to plus X, your Y going up, that's your height, and your minus C to plus C, that's your depth. So that's the way it kind of gets started there. Anyway, turning that off. And then, if you right click at the end of any network, any operator, you pull up the correct dialog window and we null it out for now. Null, there you go. One thing I should really quickly mention, I said this earlier, texture operators run on the GPU, SOPs, surface operators do not. It's a massive pain. They're gonna change it with POPs. That's why they made the whole new operator family. They're not out yet, that's why we're not covering them. They're all in beta or alpha or something like that. But these all run on the CPU. So it doesn't make any sense because you're like, what, it's 3D, it's what a graphics card is there for. Yes, but if you right click and get info, you will see 0 milliseconds time on the GPU. It all did this on the CPU. So if you want to build really big 3D scenes in TouchDesigner and have like trees and leaves and characters, sorry to say, don't use SOPs, it's not going to work. You have to kind of stay simple for now. It's been a really big drawback. I think Pauric Freeman is probably one of the people who loves them the most and has made the most out of SOPs in the world. But yeah, they can be a little bit difficult. So just, if you're a 3D artist, don't expect crazy amounts from TouchDesigner for now. POPs will change that. Right now, the SOPs all run the CPU. I just wanted to say that. Cool, so we have our little torus and we have our null. But as I said, this is 3D data. This is just a representation of what the 3D points are. But we're in 3D here. This network here is 3D. This screen that we're projecting on my laptop is 2D. It's a screen, it's a grid of pixels. So we need to get the 3D data into 2D to actually look at it and render it and send it out to a projector or a screen or whatever. So that is where the geometry, I don't know what I did there. No, perfect. So that is where the geometry comes in. The geometry is kind of our little Swiss Army knife, helping hand for turning 3D objects into 2D planes. It basically collects all your 3D points and actually makes it into one physical object, and it adds the materials to the object. So if you go in here, you right click at the end of the null or at the end of your SOP network. Let's say you've made your character, you've made your thing, you're happy with it, you're like, cool, I want to render this. You right click on it, you click on comp, and you click on geometry. And then it drops the geometry node and it drops the correct inputs and outputs to the geometry node. If you just drop it without doing that, you have to do this whole thing where you have to go inside it and put ins and outs, and it gets really messy. So just take my word for it. Always right click at the end of your SOP network to drop your geo in, and it just does it all for you. So yeah, I think most tutorials will show you that as well. Anyway, so we have our geo. Our geo is still in 3D though. You can click on this and it's still giving us this viewport, and we're like, okay, that's fantastic. You look really great, but we need to get this into a 2D surface or a 2D grid. What happens if I right click here? Well, it still stops. It's still light blue. So I'm still in the 3D world. Okay. we need to render this. And rendering is basically taking all that 3D information, giving it a camera, a perspective point, adding lighting, adding materials, smashing it all down into 2D. So I don't know if anyone works in film here, but you ever heard of lights, camera, action? You know, you need lights, you need a camera, and you need action. We got the action, we got our little main character here. Okay, then we need a render. So, sorry, I skipped that, didn't I? So the render is a 2D operator. So it isn't in the top, it's a texture operator. It's a little bit of a special one in that case because once you click on the render, it knows what it needs to do. It knows its job. It basically says, hey, I see your geo and I'm taking my data from it. So the geo is already being linked to it because you can see here geometry, asterisk just means I'm looking at everything in your network. But it's already telling us something here. No camera comp found. Rendering results may be undefined. So what did I just say? Lights, camera, action. We need a camera. So you go into comp and you find your camera. I don't know why comp is in a camera, but I think it's just like a bit of a special built thing. Like you can actually go into the camera and you'll see this. Don't know why. Just gonna get out of that again. But it's a component. It's not a top, it's not a top, it's just like a kind of a special thing. So once you drop your camera in, your render already says, okay, I got something here. We're cooking. We got a black torus. Okay, that's not exactly what you want, but we already know because if you have a 3D object, how do you know which part of the 3D object you're looking at? You can't just say, oh, I just want the whole thing. You need to have a perspective point or a reference point. That's what the camera is. It just tells you, you're looking at it from here. The camera obviously has like field of view and all these kind of options with it. You can, field of view angles, so you can like zoom in and zoom out. It's basically like your lens. You can have clipping and all that kind of stuff, but it's the most basic thing you need for rendering. So then, lights, camera, action. Once you drop a light in, the whole thing works. You basically have your point, you have your 3D object, you have your camera, you have your lighting. Now you can render it. So, that's pretty much that. I'm gonna right click at the end of the render there, type in transform. Just gonna have to follow me on this one. Type in transform, go to the fourth number on background, which is the alpha. I'm not gonna explain that. And then you just click comp over color. And then if we turn the display flag off on render, and then turn on for our last one, transform, we now have a black background. It's just a little quick hack for taking the alpha out of the screen. Wouldn't worry about it too much if you just remember that part. So, let's go back to our camera here for a second. So, this is how SOPs, this render network you have here, is the most basic render network you will need to render any 3D objects. It's just a little bit annoying that you have to do this. Everything else works quite simply in TouchDesigner. The 3D stuff, you always need to have your actor, your object, your geo, which kind of takes all your objects, puts them together, and you can do all your instancing in that. And you need a light, and you need a camera, you need a render. The most basic stuff you can use. You can also then add a material. So, materials are a different kind of operator type. And it would be too simple just to say they're textures because they're really the combination. Well, they're more of a concept. If you think about materials in the real world, everything has a material. Everything has a color, it has a pigment, but it's not just that. It has a reflectiveness, it has a feel to it, it has a roughness. Is it rough? Is it shiny? So materials really help 3D artists to think about how they want their objects to feel. It's not just a color thing. How they work in the background, way out of scope for this. But just think of materials as, I want my object to have a feel. I want it to have a color, I want it to have a roughness, a shape, or like, you can make spikes with it, you can do a lot with materials. But it's basically the way you're going to color your objects. So this is the materials dialog window. We only have a couple of them, but it's enough, trust me. So the most basic one is constant. So we drop it in and nothing happens. Fantastic. So what do we have to do with this? We have to tell the render network to use this material. It doesn't work like the render where the render just says, I know my job, I'm gonna do it, just give me my bits. You drop the material in and you need to tell the geo, which again is our kind of big boy here that brings the whole thing together. You drag the entire material operator over the geo and you see a little plus come up there on the reference. You drop it and you say parm material. Click. Okay, now it knows to use that material. The geo says, I have my link, I have my material, I'm using it. You can actually go on the render page and it will tell you here, material constant 1. Check, I got that. So, the constant material is the most basic material. It basically just looks at any point in 2D space and says, what color do I give this point? There's no lighting, I can delete this light and it will stay constant. It's kind of I don't use it that much, but it's just a way of coloring something in just one broad color, no shadows, no nothing. So if I go in here, make this a different color, whatever, 0, and then it just basically colors my torus. I should have mentioned actually at the start, you click on your camera here, and let's say you want a different view of what you're looking at. You can use the translate, rotate, pivot, all that, but a nice little trick is turn on the viewer active for your camera, and then click and drag. Way like that. Yeah, really simple way to just get a different viewport. You can see all your numbers updating here in the view in the parameters window. This can kind of screw you up. Sometimes you want to get back to basics, and to be honest, the best way to do it is click through all those numbers and hit them 0, or just delete your camera and start again. But if you're just prototyping and you just really want to get a quick look and just be like, oh, I just want to render out 1 frame. I sometimes do this, to be honest. Like, you just need to turn this off again and then have a little thing there. Okay, so constant is just a simple color, but I'm going to go back into the materials and I'm going to drop in a fawn, which is actually the base material. And you will see here, if I now go what I did earlier, click, drop on geo, parm, material. Oh, no, it's not the basic one. It used to be the basic one. Okay, so now I've dropped a material on that computes the lighting, the roughness. You can see the specular bits here. You can see that there's some reflectiveness, like there's some sort of rubber, plastic. So, and it computes the lighting with the roughness and the color, and it gives all that to the render, and the render said, okay, I know what you want. Here's your perspective, here's your lighting, here's your material, and it brings it all together. So that is the way to do that. This is looking a bit dark, and I don't like the darkness, so let's just make some color. Yeah. Okay. Class. So, did I go through that too fast? Is everyone still kind of with me? We're halfway there. We're actually so running out of time, but that's fine. I think I'm going to move on to the SOPs. We've pretty much covered all this. We're going to come back to the SOPs in a second to kind of do some camera movements because they're good there. There's the data operators. Honestly, you'll get the data operators. If you get into TouchDesigner, you will know when you need data operators and you'll be way ahead of all this. So there's no point really going through it, but it basically works with tables and it's also for Python scripting. So that's a pretty good segue. Oh yeah, sorry. Before I go to the scripting and references part, which is really important. There's this little thing that I kind of skipped over. Actually, no, sorry. Yeah, let's go up here first and click on the help. So I'm going to select my render. So select your render or select any operator you want to know more about or you need some help with. So you click on help, and you click on operator snippets. And if I have internet, or I don't even know it's an easy internet, you'll get this interactive display, and there's a version of TouchDesigner that's running, but it shows you how you use the basic render. So, and you can actually click on this, it's a fully working version of TouchDesigner, and you can copy these, you can drop them in your network, and it has a little, oops, sorry, I need something. It even tells you basic render top, blah, 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 blah. I'll probably do a way better way of explaining it than what I just did. So if you're ever stuck or you want to know more about each operator, you just click on the operator snippets, and just click through these. And it's a great way to learn each operator in its own. Or let's say you need to do something, you're like, I think this operator is going to help me. Go to the operator snippets. Really, really great resource again. Found that way too late in my life. Oh yeah, and then just a little thing as well. If you want to just go to the wiki, you click on the little question mark up here in each of the renders. Click on the question mark, and if I had a browser, I'm sure it would pull it up right now. You can try it out, and it will basically bring you to the wiki article of that operator. Saves you a bit of time searching around the internet. So, scripting and references. Okay, so I'm going to go scripting first, and then we'll move on to the referencing and do a bit of fun things with the references. But scripting is basically coding inside each little parameter. You can actually skip all of this and just write everything in Python and C++ code inside TouchDesigner and put it out to one thing. People do it, but it's kind of not recommended because you're kind of like, why? Just write it in open frameworks if you're going to do that. Like, don't use TouchDesigner if you're going to code. But needless to say, everything in the background in TouchDesigner is running in code, and all of these parameters can be modulated or changed with a script, which is just a fancy way of saying a short line of code. The scripting language inside TouchDesigner is Python. Used to be another one, now Python. Thank the fucking Lord, because it makes life so much easier. I don't know if anyone's codes Python here, but it's like English. It's really nice to write. So there's a lot of wiki articles about all the different Python scripts and all the little words you can use. We're not going to go into that. I just wanted to know that you can basically write a script into any parameter, and it basically what a script is, and there's a really nice way to show you this because we've actually been using a script the whole time inside the noise. So you might be asking, well, the LFO is moving all the time, fine, whatever, it's got a frequency. The frequency changes the speed of the LFO. Should have mentioned that earlier. Okay, so it's moving all the time. Surely the noise is the same, that's why it's moving all the time. But actually the noise comes pre-scripted inside TouchDesigner. They do that maybe just to help you out, but this is such a common thing you do that they probably just threw it in there and said we're keeping it. So basically noise is just random curves. I can't explain noise much better than that. It's a mathematical formula to calculate all the noises, like all the peaks and troughs. But you need to translate, you need to move along this kind of like space, like the number space. Otherwise, you just have a still graph. So if I go in here and I look at Tx, the translation of x, this is what it is normally. What just happened there? Oh yeah, sorry. So this is what happens normally. This is noise without any translation. It's 0.60351, whatever. So it doesn't move. It's just that part of the mathematical formula and its peaks and troughs given to you. It doesn't move. But you pretty much want it to move all the time. So if you click on this little expression box underneath it, and we delete this, and it'll type it in exactly the same. And it is the most basic script you will use. It is called abs, capital T, time, dot, frames. Sorry, it's frame. I do that every time. It's frame. Abs time dot frames. There's also one, abs time dot seconds. It is exactly the same. Abs time is basically a little formula that basically retrieves the absolute time the script or your program has been running. So our program has been running for 4,387 seconds. You close your program, open it again, it'll go back to 0 and it'll start again. But basically, because this is a real-time software, you need some way to drive values forward. And abs time dot seconds, and abs time dot frames, it's just a linear curve always going. It's a linear number always rising. So that is really good for the translation of the noise. It's actually exactly what we need. So this is your most basic script you'll be using so much, because there'll be moments you're like, I don't have a timeline, if I press play, nothing happens. How do I make this thing move forward? Abs time dot frames, abs time dot seconds, best way to do it. Because this is a script, it is a piece of code, you can write any expression in here. So you can write a math operator. Asterisk means multiply, and you can just write 0.5. I want the frame rate to move half as quickly. And it's just slowed itself down. So if you want it to double, multiply by 2, and now it moves twice as fast. So that's as far as I'm going to go with scripting. Again, once you get into scripting yourself, you'll understand it, but you kind of need to go through some of the coding things, and there's a whole repository of all the the functions that you can use in this scripting dialog window in Python to help you out. So we're going to move on to referencing though, because this is probably one of the most important things you're going to do. So referencing, we're going to go back in here, just change the time slice, and actually no, we're gonna start a new thing. So move it over here. We're gonna go in here, chop, LFO, and slow it down. Right? And then we're gonna drop a null, because as I said, always, if you're referencing channels, you reference from a null. Never reference from your LFO, because if I reference from here and send the data to somewhere, and then I decide, oh, you know what, I need to scale that, you drop the math in here, nothing's gonna happen, because you're later on down the network, you're later on down your data chain. So if you drop a null, I can drop the math in here and affect the numbers from the LFO without having to redo everything. It's just a little bit of a help for later on. So good practice, always drop a null. So referencing, as we just talked about with scripting, is just a little expression you can write that basically tells, see you later, no worries. It's a little expression you can write into each parameter to basically tell TouchDesigner, where do you get your values from? So it basically appears in a little expression here, but you've probably noticed that I haven't been doing that. So the way to easily reference something in TouchDesigner is to click on the viewer active, click the operator you want to reference to. So where do you want to send it to? Because you need your parameters window open. I want to reference to my camera. I want to reference this field of view angle. And so I'm going to click on this with the viewer being active. I'm going to drag. You're going to see this little arrow, which pretty much always tells you you're able to reference. And then you drop it here. I see the plus. Plus tells me I'm allowed to drop it. You will get this dialog window. So there is no point explaining what exports is because they're fucking shit. I don't know why they're there, but they never really work that well. So just forget about exports. Forget they ever existed. Referencing is what you always want to do. So as soon as that dialog window comes up, remember, reference. We're always referencing. Chop reference, click on it. And now you can see that my value here, in real time, whatever the value is being moved over to field of view angle. I mean, placed in there and it's affecting my camera. I'm just going to offset this for a second because can't actually see what's going on exactly. Yeah. Oh, actually, sorry, why did I just do that? Here's a great place. Exactly what I just did. I dropped in my null. I didn't think about what I was doing. I just remembered, oh, I need a math. I need to scale my value. If I hadn't put the null in there in reference for my LFO, I wouldn't be able to put my math in now. I would have to do the whole thing again. It's just a bit of a pain. So I'm going to drop math in the middle here, and exactly what we did earlier. -1 to 1, the range of an LFO. And I looked at my field of view earlier. It's like 0 to 1. Sorry, 20 to 100. Again, just ballpark it. Like, I have no idea what these values actually are, but I'm just going to play around with them and just figure it out. There you go. Done. Scaled our numbers. Our LFO is unchanged. It's the same from -1 to 1. Our math is scaling our values correctly. And then our null with the viewer active, and I have reference to my camera and change the field of view angle. So that is pretty much the way you do that. If you remembered earlier when we talked about time slicing, this is why time slicing is kind of annoying because you can't do that referencing that easy. You can only reference something when you have the present real-time number in the channel. When it's a graph, you can't reference it. You need to like change it into a time slice mode. There's operators to do that, but that's how that kind of trips you up. So that's why I'm saying we usually just work in the time slice on mode. Okay. So, is everyone okay with referencing? Is there any confusion with it? Fiona, you look a little blank. Elgis?
This is good, so I'll do it.
Yeah? Or do you need rushing or do you need to go over anything?
Thank you.
No worries. So yeah. And one thing I missed on the referencing, so once you click down here, you can see your references. So this is what I mean. Referencing is just scripting. So this is just Python saying, hey, put up an operator, it's called null4, go to the channel of null4, it's called channel 1, and get me that number. So I can change it to channel 2, but there is no channel 2, so it'll just complain and say, hey, can't find that channel. You could add a channel, I think, is it here? See? So don't worry about what I'm doing here, but basically I just changed the channel number, what the LFO is putting out to channel 2, and suddenly the reference is broken. It says, God damn it, what are you doing? I can't find that channel anymore. Flow argument must be a string or a number, non-type. It just basically means I can't find it, it's a null. So if you change this to channel 2, it works again. So referencing is really just Python, and it's just like the way we do it with the dragging is just a kind of a quick way to do the Python scripting. You can type everything out if you're that way inclined, but just so you know what referencing is, it's just scripting. If it's scripted, it means you can also write code. So I can again multiply this by 0.5 and pretty much scale my number in the script. I do this, it's probably not good practice, but I just wanted you to see that like referencing, scripting, is actually the same thing, and it's just code, and you can manipulate it with the code inside this bar. It obviously only takes you so far. You can't do for loops and go fucking crazy here, like, you know, but you can do your basic bits, like, you know. Anyway, so, my day with the LFO, and just going to get back to here. Oh yeah, while we're on referencing, so we have the font material down here.
Okay.
You want to look at our material? And basically, the font is changing the color of our object. But what if we wanted to take this render network that we had earlier here, this little stuff, and use that as our color? Well, we can actually just take the null, this is why I nulled it out earlier, from the top earlier, because this is still all computing while we're doing stuff over here. Everything's happening in real time as it's going along. So you can just take that null, drop it on the font, a plus comes up, and it asks you, okay, what do you want to do with this? There's a whole load of options here, which will be very, very handy later on down the line for any 3D people who know some of these terms already. But the color map is the most important because it changes the color. And it basically, why didn't I click on that? Well, bam. Takes all this color information, as I said, just a grid of numbers, and it maps it to our 3D surface. So, this is getting kind of fine, but let's go like 100. So now you can see the torus actually has all the color information from my render network over here. I'm just gonna bypass this threshold because it's causing me opacity. And now you can see somewhere in there, other ends. Hello. I've mapped myself onto the torus. What a fucking great story. Anyway, gonna get rid of the video device. This is gonna get really annoying. We're gonna go back into movie fighting, but you can keep yourself on your torus if you're really so inclined. But I'm gonna go back to my jelly beans. And this time, I'm actually gonna drop in sweat. So, here's a little thing I'm just gonna do on purpose. Does anybody know, this is the jelly bean, but I have a jelly bean file now that has this grid in the background. Does anybody know what's happening here? What's going on with the jelly beans, and why is the torus not there anymore fully?
It's an alpha.
Yes, you said that. Genius. Absolutely. It's an alpha channel, exactly. So earlier, you might have realized when I was like, doing this transform thing, and I'm just going to type this number in here, so the background grid disappears. It's just an alpha channel. An alpha channel is a fourth type. It's not a color channel, but it is a channel that is a grid laid over this whole thing, which basically says where are invisible pixels and where are not invisible pixels on our 2D screen grid. So this picture basically has some color information, and over here there's an alpha channel of 0, which basically just means even if there's color here, it's masked out, it's gone. So if you know from Photoshop or After Effects masks, that is all they are. It's just one channel where you're drawing black, you're drawing black over it, and it basically just gets rid of the color information. So, and once you do that, the material can read alpha channels, and it basically just maps invisibility, you can call it, onto our torus. So then you basically have a see-through torus. Okay, sorry if I'm flying through this, but I'm really aware of time. So we're gonna get to the last little bit here. I've covered the math, I've covered the LFO. There's something that's not written on this, and I think it's kind of handy. But basically, I would like this camera to move exactly like this thing. So I want to rotate my camera around the object. It's quite a common thing to do. If you have a nice object and you want to make some visuals, you usually want to track it around the object. What happens, I'm just going to take off the reference. What happens here though, if I rotate this value, oops, sorry, 1 second. 10. See, if I rotate this value, it's not rotating around the object, it's rotating around its own axis. And people in 3D will know this. It's just like it's doing its own thing and you're just like, what the hell is going on? So, I'm gonna just delete the camera, drop it in again, just to get a blank default camera. See, the render finds it again, no problem. Then, I'm gonna go into comp, and I'm gonna pull up a null. And a null in the comp is a little bit different because it basically is a singular point that has a translation, a rotation, it has a location within 3D space. So I can basically use these translation points and tell the camera, hey, forget about your place in this whole world. I want you to make your world around null. I want you to rotate around my little point 0, 0, 0. I know that the null is where the torus is because everything starts at 0 unless you've moved it. If you've moved it, that's on you. Sorry, you're on your own. Start at 0, 0, drop the null in, and then you take this, you drag it, and this is the parenting output, and it's only on the comps. And I just wanted you to see this and know that it's there. You might use it much, but you can see these don't have this. The comps have this parenting attribute, which basically just means, hey, this is your parent now. Take your orientation and your position from your null. So basically, the camera, 1 second. Nope. I fucking knew this was gonna work. 1 second, how do I do this? Sneeze up, back your pants up.
What are you doing?
I was trying to get it to rotate around it. I thought it was just hair. 1 second. Oh, sorry. Do I move this? No. Oh yeah. Sorry. You don't rotate the camera because the camera is getting its position from the null. So you rotate the null now. Because again, what I said earlier, the camera is getting all its rotation, all its position information from the null. So if you edit that, you're just editing over edit. So basically, you go to the null and you rotate this. And now, because the camera is locked like the moon, like a satellite, like planet locked to a planet, it's basically moving around it with it. So I don't know if that made any sense to anybody, but fair play if it did. So we're going to go back in your math. We have our LFO. We're going to scale our math from 0 to 360 because we want it moving 360 degrees of a circle. We want it moving all the way around. We're going to change our LFO to ramp. Sorry, you're just going to have to follow me on this, but ramp, it'll start at 0, go up to 1, drop straight back down. So 0 to 360, 360 to 0 again, and it'll just keep doing that. Then you take this, take the null, click on your null parented handle, so our kind of center of the universe, and now reference to the rotation, chop reference. Hey, look at that. And then I'm just going to chop reference twice. And now, hey, all that for that, right? What a fucking joy. So, yeah, I think we're gonna, is everyone's brain refried? Is it just me? Yeah, it's probably just me. Will we leave it there? Or do people have any questions, maybe? Does anyone want me to go through anything? Or do you want me to try and make anything? Pretty simple. Yes.
Could you just explain the time slice again?
Yes, absolutely. So, time slicing is only for chop stamp. It's only for channel data. It's got no relevance to anything else. And if you see a channel that basically has this graph and this number with it, the time slicing is on. It is every moment of the frame rate is basically just being, it basically just calculates its number at that moment and throws it out and just passes it on to the next and the next, and you can reference it. If you turn time slicing on, like we had in the, sorry, where's the noise? I spelled that wrong. Noise. The noise operator is time slice off. So in this operator, you always get 1, which is your current moment, and all the numbers and the values tied to that number that will come later on. So it basically means you can grab all those numbers because TouchDesigner has pre-computed them and you can use them at any point. So that's what I mean. Once you get to that point, you'll know what to do with that. But right now, there's not much point explaining it. The only thing you need to know is if you pull up the noise and you just want a singular value, which I said time slicing is on, that's your most basic everyday use case. You click on noise, go to comments, comment page for all chops is the same, and you turn time slicing on. And once you turn time slicing on, it'll just give you the current value in that frame. If I pause it pauses the value. It says, hey, this is the value I've been at right now. If I continue it, it just continues on.
So like for displacing the pixels, the full graph was there. Remember when you open the jelly bean? But if you like take away, or if you put time slice on, it'll move the whole thing up and down.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay, so
I could actually do.
so the displace that's up there is kind of like a representation of what the noise looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
So, 1 second, let me get the other jelly bean up here again, because that's just a great bean. No, is that working? I don't know if that graph's correct. No, it should be. Okay, so this is the time slice version. This is our now point in time if you've moved it on, but we haven't right now. So this is an array of numbers ranging from 0 to, I think it goes down to -1 to +1. And this graph is displacing these pixels up and down. It's going up and down because that's what the displace is set to, but you can also set it to go down and up, or inverted, or go sideways, or different. You can use different colors. You can tell the red to go up and the greens to go down, or whatever you want to do. But basically, you're taking these numbers and you're converting them through the chop to top to brightness values. But the brightness values aren't like making these go brighter. It's literally just a way of storing all these numbers in a grid of numbers going from 0, black, to white, 255. And the displace just knows what to do with that. The displace can't use this because it has no idea what to do with it. It's just like, these are just channel values. They're not even in the right timings, they're not in the right ranges, so it's just like, just get away with that, like no. Give it a chop to top, give it a texture, into its texture input, it's like, Gucci, I know what to do. I'm gonna take all these values and displace your image. So you can see kind of here that this peak here is this curve going up here.
Yeah.
So that's the only time really you use time slicing. If you basically want to have a graph of numbers and you want to use that graph, that time windowed version. It's a time windowed version, but as I was saying, it's not that handy. So if it's confusing you too much, always just try to get away from time slicing. And as I said, time slicing, turning it off, commons window, time slicing on, and then it's gone. Yep, that's pretty much it. There is also a time slice chop. So I think if there might be some channels, some chops that can turn that off. But if you put it into a time slice chop, it'll give you just it'll basically run around this, like, you know, like what's that game called? The sleigh. It's like going up and down the hills. It's basically just like running up and down this and basically just giving you the value of the peaks and troughs. So if you really need a time slice version, you can use that. But yeah, you need to go in here then and look at the trim, hold, linear. It's a little bit confusing, but pound size top, that can be chop can be kind of handy to get you into that singular value, one-dimensional feeling. Cool. Yeah, I guess if people want to stick around here and play around, does anyone, I don't know, who are fried, who want lunch, can people stay around here circa, Roisin? Or is it kind of a... Okay. If you want a little challenge to do, I was going to run through this, but it's written on the back of your sheet. Very relaxing. Now introduce the mouse chop and switch out some LFO for the mouse chop in places. Figure out how to do that. I was going to go through it with you, but I think I'm not good anymore. So this is your LFO. It's been referenced to the null, and little hot tip, we all gave you the file, which is the finished file. So if you're really stuck, have a look at it. But just try. Try and drop in a mouse chop. It's called mouse, it's in the chop. And try to make this torus track with your mouse. So if you move left or right, the torus spins. If you go up and down, the torus tips up and down. See if you can do that. And if you're stuck, it's in the file, but give yourself that little challenge. Otherwise, thanks you all for coming here, and we might see all of you 2:30 seminar with Pauric Freeman down there and in the next workshop. Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.